It's the Friday Feels, and we're back with your first sip of the weekend. You're now tuned in to this week's episode of Your Happy Hour. I'm your host, Nicole Carmine, and it's amazing to have you here, joining me this week as we uncover the truths about being a human and a working professional. What are you up to this Friday? Well, whatever it is, this moment is just for you. And we're back with another episode of the Friday Feels podcast, Your Happy Hour. A very merry belated Christmas to you all out there. I hope you had wonderful holidays with family, friends, and lots of treats. I hope your bellies aren't exploding from all the sweeties and yummy things. And as we crawl closer to what is almost the end of this year, can you believe it? I have the privilege of talking to a very special guest, and thank you for squeezing us into between Christmas and New Year. Today we're talking about, we're still continuing our theme of reinventing your conditioning. It's the last week of this theme, and our topic today is living a pivotal life. And today I'm unpacking this with Rachana Bhide. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Nicole.
All the way from New York City.
Yes. Greetings from New York City. Happy holiday season to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. And with all the love from Paris, I hope it's a bit warmer where you are. Although I've been in New York City around Christmas time. I know it's cold.
I still have ski pants on. I'm wearing, the dress I wanted to wear for this, but it is quite chilly. So I'm wearing ski pants and I'm in a co-working space. There's not many people here, but it's a great time to vibe with you.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, keep warm and cozy. So, Rachana, you are an organizational psychologist, but I know you've walked quite a road. So you've been a Bloomberg news broadcaster. You've had like over 25 years of experience in leadership and change management and what I think the buzzword of being the future of work. And you've also actually been a keynote speaker and an MC in an amazing organization, the Women of Silicon Valley, European Women in Tech, ESPN. There's so many like amazing things that you've done. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a background of where you've come from. And then I really want to talk about some of the stuff you're doing now, which I think is really interesting. And I know, I don't want to give a spoiler alert from my side. I know you're going to tell the story a lot better than I can. But yeah, maybe just a little bit of a background and what this topic of reinventing your conditioning means to you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Reinventing and living a pivotal life, I think this topic really struck me as I looked back on the 25 years of being a psychologist. So I've been a workplace psychologist for 25 years. And I say workplace psychology, that is officially where I've been doing most of my psychology work. So that includes things that you mentioned like leadership, team development, a lot of change management. And so pivoting has really been, that's the crux of change. And so I would say I've kind of done that in maybe 3 to 5 different chunks. So the first chunk of that was as a management consultant. So I did that for 14 years. With Accenture, I had an amazing opportunity there to just learn and soak up all the tools around change. How do we make change effective? How do you manage stakeholder expectations, those kinds of things? And there's a lot of tools that you do, spreadsheets and tactics and things that you get from being in a corporation that does that with other companies. So I was on the road. I did the whole consulting thing for about 14 years in total. The last 3.5 of that was in Germany. So a lot of that was another bit of a life pivot. And then I came back to the States and then took kind of the second chunk of my workplace psychology was really in-house. And that's when I would say I turbocharged it from the standpoint of, in addition to having the tools to do it in companies, I got my graduate degree here in New York. And that gave me a lot of insight into the personalities of leaders the kind of typical things we see about, are you a task-oriented leader or are you a relationship-oriented leader? Well, I really took to the relationship-oriented piece. And the deeper that we got in my graduate studies and then just what I was observing around, I was seeing how human people are, which is kind of obvious, but how human we are at work, and might not actually be able to access that humanity in a way that, of course, shows compassion and kindness, but then also just really shows what it is that we ourselves might need in order to grow into the best version of a leader or into the best version of a team member. So that graduate degree really helped me see a lot of additional things about psychology that now I would say in the third chunk, just before COVID hit, I left corporate. I had been doing a lot of, again, as mentioned, a lot of internal consulting. And then at Bloomberg, I got a really just brilliant opportunity. This is what New York City is about, and this is what I'm writing about now through this elephant. I'll talk about that in a minute. But coming to New York, you find a lot of, and probably Paris is similar, big cities where there's lots of opportunity. Bloomberg gave me a really amazing opportunity to take my psychology and then do it in a media way. So I was doing a lot of Bloomberg Live. I was broadcasting on Bloomberg Radio, reading news headlines. And news headlines, of course, that's a very fixed way to report, but it gave me a lot of training and a lot of tools to then interview people kind of similar to what you and I are doing in a conversation about the future of work and about their own leadership style. And so being a psychologist in a media standpoint or from a media perspective was a really cool way to see my profession and then connect with other people. And I mentioned COVID because I was doing that with Bloomberg, I would say about 2 years before COVID, and then I left corporate. And since then, I've been really fascinated with the world. I've been fascinated with AI, I've been fascinated with change, I've been fascinated with Gen Z coming in, and sort of taking an amalgamation of all the things that I've learned over now 25 years and trying to frame corporate psychology in a way that might be fun or might be insightful in a way that maybe people hadn't thought of. And so that's where I use a lot of metaphors, and we can talk about kind of the more creative aspect of that.
Oh, I love that. And what a journey. I mean, gosh, you've also traveled a lot all over the world. And, this is kind of, we tend to, I always say this on the podcast, we tend to gravitate towards people tend to gravitate towards the podcasts that have traveled, that have experienced these different lives and kind of gone through transitions, which is what pivoting is, right? I mean, you get to these points in your life and you make decisions and then you go into different directions, and it's never easy. And it is very human to not want to embrace that change, but you've done so much of that. So yeah, what was that like, kind of going from corporate and then actually going through lockdown, not having that? And I know that there's also a deeper reason that you and I connected. You took a little journey to South Africa, I know, and there's a story there. So maybe, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I'll say that I'll take it back to Germany super quick because I sort of forget how important going to Germany was for my story, because I had basically said to myself, Accenture, like I'd mentioned, you have lots of tools, you have lots of templates, and you have lots of ways of implementing change. And I wanted to see, does that work in another culture? And so propelling myself over into Germany, and I say that somewhat dramatically, but it really was that, because I wasn't really on an expat package. So I was, I had to have German health insurance and sign a German contract. And so I look back on that time that I also experienced a lot of life there. I had, I was dating someone, we had a breakup, I had to find my own apartment. I mean, some of those, I found great friends. I mean, I remember coming back from Shanghai, and I'm not saying that as a flex to be like, oh, I was flying from Shanghai, but like literally coming back from, a trip abroad, and, my best friend from Germany, she was German, her mom is like my German mom, like picked me up from the airport because she knew I was like going through a difficult time with my breakup. So I felt a lot of humanity there. And so those were skills that I think I got around, age 30, 31, 32 in a completely different culture. So when COVID hit, I'm not going to say that I was like very prepared, but I had a lot more resilience and a lot more skills from that experience. And then also I would say, of course, from being a psychologist. And so the biggest thing that helped me during COVID was seeing it as an opportunity for relief. and to just say, there's a reason that something like this is happening. And if I can put my own fingerprint on it, it might be not that I have to go save the world, not that I have to use all my psychology in a way that I had been doing it just previously in COVID. I was doing a big project separate from my day job and separate from media around the positive role of men as allies for women. And so I was doing, that's when I was speaking also a lot about collaboration. And so all those things, it gave me an opportunity to say the world needs these feelings of security and safety and collaboration more than ever, and yet maybe that's not my job right now. And I said that because I had gone to South Africa. We can talk about that in a moment, because it did really change my perspective. But I leaned into Carl Jung, who is a very well-known Swiss psychologist. He's from the Freudian school, but he also had a lot of depth psychology that he added. He looked at, astrology and the stars and constellations, and and dreams. And one of the things he said, or one of the things he taught that really struck me, was that in the first half of your life, and this gets to pivots and life changes, the first half of your life is about resources. So, find your strengths, play to your strengths, get, spouse, money, kids, education, so that the second half of your life becomes more about meaning and purpose. And I think that probably will resonate with a lot of people, at any point. But what's really different about the way that I thought about it and what Carl Jung said is that it's not just about doing something different and finding meaning. It's also picking up parts of yourself that didn't serve you in the first half of your career, or in the first half of your life. So maybe being compassionate and creative and all the things that we're going to continue to talk about on this podcast weren't necessarily things I could have done in the workplace. And being introverted and taking time by myself were not things that I could do as a management consultant or as a media host. But that's what you're supposed to do if you want to pivot and you want to grow and find meaning. And so basically giving myself the relief to say, what's it like if I'm not extroverted and I'm super introverted during this time of lockdown? I had the privilege of doing that because I, lived alone, and I had the opportunity to do that. I don't think everybody has that opportunity, but it might not be, staying in your apartment during COVID. It might be, instead of being very sensing and being very data-driven, which we take a lot of pride in, it might be just use your intuition. So flexing parts of myself that I was as a kid, didn't really get to do between ages of, 13 and 40 because of society, then sort of came back to me. And that's where I found a lot of my creativity and I think how I found strength and resilience in that time.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, I can so resonate with everything that you're saying. I think a lot of people feel that. Like, I love Carl Jung too. And I think he's really spoken a lot of wisdom out there. So whoever's quite interested in psychology, go check him out. And yeah, I think a lot of us do feel that. I mean, I often speak to friends who say, the 20s were so hard, but that first bit of life, like teens, 20s, it's not an easy period because you are trying to figure out who you are, and you might make decisions that are more pleasing to other people. And then you kind of enter this other phase, and I know for a lot of women, it's this Saturn return they talk about when you hit 30. I definitely felt that, like kind of died and reborn, in some way. But I feel like when you hit 30s and you enter your 40s as well, it's a lot more peaceful because you understand who you are. If you've done the work, you understand who you are, you can enjoy your life, and then you can kind of enter a different phase in a different way in 50s, 60s and forward. So I know we're all probably heading towards a place where we're going to live much longer than we are now. So this is going to change and look different. And I can already see that, kind of 40s the new 30, 50s the new 40 and all of that. So, but I love that you've explored all of this in yourself, that you gave yourself a space to be able to sit with parts of yourself that you might not have discovered yet or had given the space to breathe. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit about what came out in there, because I know it's a gem. It's a lot of good gems. So.
Oh, that's so sweet to hear. And it really started from South Africa. So this is a kinship that you and I will always hold, I think. I want to just comment on what you just said, though, as well, about us living longer, because, I sort of loosely said, okay, first half of the life, second half of the life, but Carl Jung, and this is kind of why I think what's an awesome opportunity for me and for all of us as psychologists or anthropologists, or those of us that are interested in the human experience, because we now get to see what does the next third look like, and so I know the Saturn return, that's right around the time that I probably went to Germany, that I did go to Germany. I went there at age 30. And so, gosh, at that time, and even, I would say, even when I was doing media at Bloomberg, like, I thought that was it. This is my identity. This is who I am supposed to be. And that was true, and it was also not true forever. And so, and one thing I will say then that kind of takes us to what I'm working on now, to answer your question now directly, which is, one of the things I loved as a psychologist was using metaphors. I felt that metaphors really found, some people naturally speak in metaphors. I didn't realize how much I now see metaphors everywhere, but metaphors are a great way to take away stress from a topic that might be difficult. I'll give you a quick example that the Male Allies project I did was based on a tennis court. So that was kind of the corner of the court project was a female tennis player whose male ally was in the corner. So he wasn't actually playing, but it gave a really nice, I thought it was nice. It gave a very a thoughtful way to look at male-female dynamics when, the man isn't even the one playing. It's the woman's story. It's her agency. So metaphors have always been part of how I think I've put psychology into the world. I've never done it this way before, which is I came prepared with my elephant. So this is Fonty, my elephant. He's just a stock image, and now he's been illustrated a lot through AI. But I started writing Fonty as a brainstorm of humanity in the workplace. And specifically, I was seeing a lot of people were getting let go during COVID. And Fonty's story is he comes from South Africa to New York City to be a window washer. And he loves windows. He now, over time, so what's eventually has happened is what started as just this kind of like heroic little story about this elephant that comes and he has all these side hustles. And this was very much the world before COVID. Over time, I was like, wow, well, all those skyscrapers he came to New York to wash, like, those are all empty now during COVID. So does that mean that his own dream has been met in such a way that the only next step is a collapse? So there was a lot of metaphoric and symbolism that I was seeing through just this character. And so I had a choice to say I could very much, and I sent the prototype out to some friends, and originally kind of as a kid's book. I'm definitely not a kid's writer, but I am a psychologist. And so one of the things I was thinking was this could be a very, very effective workshop. How do you bounce back from getting let go from a job or seeing your skyscrapers now empty that you washed with such care? But I sort of said to myself, this is, again, Rach, this is the only time maybe ever that you're going to be able to just learn and absorb and see what it's like to be a creative. And so what about if you don't turn it into a workshop and you don't hustle it out? And what ended up happening as a result is many, many things. I started seeing Fonty as a creation and not a commercial tool. And what I was able to invite in as a result is people like you who are making music and who Fonty and I can listen to your music, and he almost has his own identity. I think if you're a creator, whatever you create, you bring life into it. And so there's a lot of corporate lessons and fables and things I can mention about the future of AI that's all very relevant. But starting with the knowing that no matter what happens with AI, like Fonty's not losing his job, we're gonna always be able to put compassion and kind of what elephants, what they stand for, we can always put that into our stories in a way that hopefully reaches people.
I'm like, I'm in awe of what you're doing. And just listening to you speak about it with such passion is wonderful. And I'm so grateful that the universe sent you Fonty, and that we can also learn more about that. And elephants are just such beautiful creatures who understand so much about the world and communicate in amazing ways and care for each other. And they're very communal, they're very tribal, they're very independent, but also together, which I think is so beautiful. Yeah, I feel like you've just walked such an incredible journey to get to this point. And I want to touch on something you said, because I resonate with that a lot, is trying so hard to look for always the commercial moments and things, and then having to resist not to do that. It's really hard. I think we all kind of prone to always wanting to think about how to monetize things. They say, do follow your joy and the money will follow. I think that's mostly true, but you know, I feel like it's really important because of what you're doing, because I feel like I'm often thinking about how to turn things into things I can sell, things I can put out into the world. And it's really those creations that have been more for me, that have been personal, that resonate with other people. You know, and I remember when I was tutoring Afrikaans, which is my home language, in South Africa, and I was a student and I was tutoring these young kids from school, and the dad, I had a discussion with him and I said to him the one day, I really want to be a writer. And he said he had written the script, and I said, that's wonderful. And he said, well, look, if I can give you any advice, it's write it for yourself first. And then if the world resonates with it, that's amazing. But just do it for you, you know. And that always stuck with me. And it's still so hard to do. So, you know, just kudos for taking that space. And it's actually quite courageous to take that space, because we're not conditioned in that way. You know, if we talk about reinventing and giving yourself the breathing room to do that. So tell us a little bit more about Fonty. Does he have friends?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for asking about him in the way that you've asked about him. He does. He came to New York City. So basically, you know, elephants, they grow up in herds. And so they grew up in a matriarchal society. And so the women elephants, and this is like in real life, the women elephants stay with the herds. And so Fonty, as a boy elephant, he was raised by his mom and his grandma and his aunts. And then in real elephant worlds, boy elephants leave around like teenage years. And then they become lone bachelors. Sometimes they find bachelor herds. So it kind of made sense. I hadn't known any of this until I started writing Fonty, but it kind of made sense that he would be the one to sort of cast off on his own. And so he ends up going from the herd in somewhere in the bush and the savannah of South Africa to Cape Town. And he works in a gift shop, and he decides, you know, he overshoots it even more and says, oh, well, I've got to go make something of myself in New York City. So he goes to New York City, and he finds, and it's so funny because it's so fitting right now at Christmas, the story is he meets his best friend who's a mouse, Morris Mouse. Look, it's kind of a name that I just sort of threw out there, and I was like, I don't even really like the name Morris, but it sort of worked. And then what ended up happening is I started writing this story about Morris Mouse. And so there's all the irony of, you know, this big elephant that's friends with the little mouse. You have the South African kind of immigrant elephant coming in with this New Yorker. And Morris grew up under the New York City subway, under Wall Street. And so Morris's whole story is one of just, he's Fonty's kind of sidekick. He represents New York City. He represents parts of me, you know, Wall Street, and then he now performs on Broadway. So there's a bit of an acting thing in my history too. So, and that itself could be its own arc, right? Like going from this very traditional sense of Wall Street to something much more creative. I mean, Morris Mouse embodies that. So he has that friend. And then another friend I'll just mention super quickly is a pigeon named Rhonda Pigeon. And she's an innovator. And so she's a fashion designer who, she's a fashion design pigeon. She grew up in all the boroughs, flying around all over all the boroughs of New York City with her big extended family. And she ultimately, she was going to be a message for girls in STEM. And she continues to be that because she's an innovative pigeon. And so she's created bird bands. So she basically has created a social network for birds because as a pigeon, she's a very natural communicator. Pigeons are great communicators. But she said, well, I want to kind of let other birds communicate the way we do. So she's extended her talent, learned how to code, and created these wearable tech items for all birds to communicate when they're, in the sky or not. So there's a lot in there around like design thinking, innovation. You know, Fonte and Rhonda go to New York Tech Week together. And so I have like 50 articles now on LinkedIn under the elephant in the window, which is, it's more than just Fonte's stories. It's also his way of kind of feeding back to us humans what he's seeing. And so that tech aspect also has kind of come through with a lot of the characters. So thank you for asking about his friends, because they're all parts of me as well that can kind of coach and nurture Fonte's journey here in New York.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I want to ask you a question, and, you know, if it's too personal, don't feel like you have to answer. But do you feel like you weave a lot of your own story into the characters? Or is it other people that you observe? How do you kind of, or do you channel? How do you come up with the things that you write? You know?
Oh, that's, you know, I would have answered it immediately, as you said, are there parts of me? And the answer is yes. But then when you said, do I channel it? That's the most accurate description. A lot of it is just, I mean, literally, I said Morris, and in fact, the reason I mentioned his name so intently is I even wanted to change his name, and I'm like, no, like, this is what came to me, and this is just what his name is. And it turns out that the Wall Street charging bull, it's like that statue right in front of Wall Street, you know, the one that's a symbol of resilience. So I have a whole story also. I've sort of brought that bull to life, and he represents resilience on Wall Street. And like, what does that mean? You're carrying the burden of the financial system on your back. And, you know, people take pictures with him. Does he feel violated? So there's a lot of intensity around even just him as a representative. But that charging bull, which is kind of the first, I would say, big creature, even though he's just a statue, that Morris sort of came encounter with before he ever even met Fonte. So when Morris was young, he would go scurry up and like sit on the back of the statue and look up at the stars. And now the story is Fonte was looking at the same stars, and so we're all one big universe. That street where the charging bull is, it's called Morris Street. It's at the intersection of, it's at the intersection of Morris Street and Broadway. I had no idea. I genuinely had no idea. So those are the kinds of little magic things that do come when I just sort of feel like I honor what I'm meant to do. And it does become, I mean, again, we're talking about kind of the transition from corporate to creative. I'll say this, I would never have thought this in corporate, but it does become a little otherworldly. It becomes spiritual.
That's amazing. And then I can totally resonate with that. You know, I think also as I've started opening up those channels, these things just drop in from places and you're like, surely I could not have thought of this, or where did this come from? Like, it's not mine necessarily, because you get to learn what is yours and what's not necessarily yours, but meant to be in the world. And you just become this kind of vessel to share that, you know. And I think that's very much what we, like, I love the word honor that you used, you know, to honor the journey of being that messenger for other people, which I think is so beautiful. And I think, you know, Friday Feels is very much about living and working authentically, and how do we do that? So I think everything about your message just, you know, hones in on being in touch with yourself, no matter where you are in your journey, and whether that's corporate or creative. Creatives have to do a little bit of harder work from the beginning to get in touch, I think, with that part of themselves. But we're all kind of invited to do that. So I can imagine that hasn't been necessarily easy for you to transition and then talk about your new world in a way to older crowd, or?
Yeah. I was kind of nervous to chat about this, because it is something that I don't know if it's the introversion. I think a lot of people, even after COVID, probably resonate with. It becomes a little bit more difficult to go out in the world when we've just all lived a very different life. And I think a lot of us, even if they're not formally pivoting into creativity or a new way of being, a lot of people, I think, do struggle with even just making sense of who we have become in this world. And so maybe Fonte is a way. I hadn't thought about this until just now. So this might not even be accurate, but it's worth considering that maybe what I'm doing with Fonte, among many things, is just having a safe character to boldly go into this new world. That's actually been what Fonte's always been. And when you mentioned also being a vessel, that's been a very helpful way now. It's difficult to see yourself that way because ego and identity and, we become so fixed. Number one, we become fixed in who we are, especially in the States. I think, in high school, for example, you're an athlete or you're in student government. I don't know how activities necessarily work in schools abroad, but like you become something very early and you take a lot of pride in that. And as mentioned, as we kind of talked about earlier, it gets you to a really great point and you can continue doing that. One of the things that I've realized with Fanti, I keep looking down at like this picture of him. It's like he represents optimism and hope and this, but he's not real. I mean, he's real, but he's not real. He's a collection of characteristics. He's an archetype. Morris Mouse is an archetype. The pigeon's an archetype. And so the more that I write about these archetypes almost in a very fixed way, the more it gives them as the characters the opportunity to love each other and love what the other archetype has, And at some point, those things just start to blend and it does become a much more collective way of being. And as a result, I don't know that I'm there yet, but I think I'm getting pretty close. Your own ego just goes away. What started as a really, really helpful, effective way of taking a metaphor to articulate maybe something that was difficult or a little bit, just a new way of articulating something becomes how you see everything. And so I look at a squirrel. I mean, this sounds kind of silly, but you walk to work and you see a squirrel on the, and I think I'm like, oh, he could have any number of personalities. Like how is he going to interact with Fanti today? So there is being a vessel for creativity has really, I think, also helped me ground, I would say also as a psychologist, for potentially what's to come. There's a lot of change that's happening in the world right now.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I can see that. That's, I think a lot of people are talking about this now, or maybe it's just my YouTube algorithm that's feeding me what I want to hear. But I think we want stories. We understand ourselves through stories, and I think I've always loved movies and books because of that, and that's really part of my journey is also to write more movies and books and things like that, because sometimes we find it quite hard, I think, as humans to detach from this, we keep calling it the vessel, but like being able to kind of look at yourself and have empathy for who you are and the experience you're going through and understand yourself on a deeper level, because we get so attached to the emotions that sit in this energy bubble around us, I think, So stories help us to, for a moment, kind of have an objective perspective and see, oh, actually, maybe I also have that personality type, or actually I also react like that in that way, and oh, okay, but maybe if I did this, it would turn out differently, or whatever it is, or just appreciate who you are. So I think that's beautiful, and I can't wait to see how this story unfolds for you, and I'm curious, in a year from now, where do you kind of see this going, or for you, what does your journey look like?
Oh my gosh, I don't mean to be that person, but I don't know, just because I don't know. I know what I hope, and I know what I'm observing. So it's very interesting. So Fanti and I, originally we started writing on Instagram. So I would write all the stories, and this was in 2020, and I would just use, again, this stock image, and instead of getting an illustrator, I would just put him in different scenes. And it was enough to create the character and for me to kind of know what it was. But was it ready to be a book? No. Was it ready? It's probably still not ready to be a book. And I have a publisher and I've got multiple manuscripts, but the world is changing so much that the sort of standalone books that I was thinking, I don't know, I'm kind of curious to see in the next 6 months even how those will resonate. So the books will eventually come. I think the other thing that I'm really kind of fascinatedly seeing is Fanti lives on LinkedIn. So he has his own LinkedIn page. He has 6 followers by design. He just sort of, there's a lot of Easter eggs, I'll say that, in what I write. There's a lot of world building that goes way, way back. And I mean, Fanti's community right now, it's maybe 15 people who very consistently have been following, and I'm so grateful for those 15 folks. Some of them are very spiritual, some of them are very corporate, some of them are just like really good friends of mine. One in particular, whenever I hit up or whenever I hit post, I'm like, I know she's gonna see this and she's just gonna burst out laughing because she can't believe that I'm doing something like this. I say we because I feel like everybody that's part of the Fonte's herd is part of the community. But I say that because he lives on LinkedIn and he doesn't get a lot of visibility. I mean, I share him on my page and we've written 50 articles, and I'll go sometimes into, let's say, AI, and I'll say, oh, why might people not be resonating? And AI's first, it's so fascinating. I use a lot of AI to write the stories. I don't write the stories with AI, but Fonte and I are very conscious of AI as a team member. And so one of the things we're trying to do also is as soon as AI dropped, like 10 days after it dropped in 2022, we were on it. Fonte has his own account. So seeing how willing AI was to believe in this elephant and believe and create his whole universe made me realize that AI, from my perspective as a creative, it's a very creative tool. It's very willing to go wherever you want it to go. But what's interesting is even when I would ask it, like, oh, how can we reach more people and things like that, it would give me kind of commercial suggestions, like, oh, you might want to target this and you might want to do this. And I'm like, no, that doesn't. So I'll probe it more and it will go to, oh, you know what? Well, Rachana, maybe Fonte is existing on LinkedIn. He's the elephant in the window. He washes windows. He doesn't necessarily want to be in the conference room. He's happy washing windows. And he just, it's not like he's out there desperate for people to see him, but like, it would be nice if people could see him, because then he could say, oh, like, look at what's out here. Like, let me tell you about my experiences. And so he's existing kind of on LinkedIn right now in a way that he almost exists in the imaginary world, which is he's there. And if if in your busy day you want to scroll on and click and see, like, oh, he went to a party and there was an 80s cover band, and oh, he doesn't know what 80s music kind of was about. So AI can explain it to him, but Rachana can tell him about, the first slow dance she had, or how she would listen to this song in, the backseat of her Chevrolet. Like, those are the kinds of things that come together. So 1 year from now, I hope that people just continue to click and read the stories and find some meaning out of them, particularly as they think about imagination and the effectiveness of their own creativity as a supplement to what AI can bring us.
I love that. Oh, wow. No, and I love that AI has become so personal in this journey. I think a lot of people are so scared of it, but you've embraced it with such compassion and openness. I think that's really an invitation to all of us to explore. And I'm starting to use ChatGPT a little bit more as well. And I'm like, oh, it's never unkind to me. I quite enjoy it.
It's the best.
So I really think it's very inspirational what you're doing. And, I know the journey is not always so easy, as you've walked it. And, you speak with a lot of passion but there must be days that it's, tough to kind of have gone through from one thing to another. And one question we always ask, and I'm curious what yours is, but what is like that thing, that professional advice that someone might have said once that stuck with you, that changed things for you, that you can share?
Oh, yeah. So it would be my first career counselor at Accenture. So because when you're consulting, you're on multiple projects, so you always have a different boss, you're at the client site, so you have like that kind of one anchor point that is your kind of mentor. And so it was a gentleman named Jim, and he, very early on, I knew I wanted to go into workplace psychology. It was called change management at the time. And to do that, we had to do that with a lot of technical projects. And so he said to me, I get it, I know you really want to do this. He was also a change management person, and he said, do yourself a favor and take, at the time, SAP was like the big software that we were implementing. And he said, take SAP training. He said, do the functional side, become technical. He said, you don't have to do it forever, but do it for just a little bit so that you can be, and again, in his mind, it was so that I could be credible as a 21-year-old, doing change management. And so I listened to him, I did that. And it was so interesting because it was the first time I kind of understood that I didn't need to do that to be a technical person. I needed to do it so that I could understand that there are many, many ways to look at the world, and you can piece them together in a way that makes sense for you. And so this was like 2001. So user experience, for example, was not as big of a thing as it is now. But that would have been, for example, had I wanted to go down a UX path, that would have been great advice that he would have given me. Yeah. I share that because that's kind of become sort of part of my path throughout. And so when I look at Germany or I look at psychology and media, there is always a really effective way to take disparate fields and make them something that can be your own. And then you can really put all of yourself into it. And that's a lot of what Fonte is. The elephant in the window, a lot of what I'm writing. I mean, there's 80s music, there's different references. I'll write in German, and Morris has a, Moritz Maus, he has a different, he has a twin in German. So all those things, of course, those are parts of my experiences, but I genuinely feel that expanding into something that you might not ever have wanted to doesn't mean you ever have to go into it forever, but it does allow you to connect pieces that maybe you would never have had access to. I think learning a language also does that as well.
It does, and a language is very much, a culture is inside a language, I find, so you're learning so much about that. And I think that's incredible advice. Thank you so much for sharing that with all of us. And I've also kind of experienced a little bit of that. You don't really know why you're walking this weird, windy journey, doing things that aren't very streamlined sometimes, that at the time doesn't always make sense. And then later you're like, now I can use this and bring it in this way. And it's great because you're integrating parts of yourself, you expanding your mind. I remember my dad always used to say to me, you don't really go to university to kind of walk out as specialist. You go to learn how to think in different ways. And that always stuck with me. It's true, and it kind of takes the pressure off a little bit because then you can open your mind to different things. So
totally. That's we learned a term in grad school, and it was the time release capsule, and it was basically, it's so true. You learn something, and if you just internalize it and make meaning of it for at that moment. 10 years later, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I get it now. Whoa, so that's probably patience is another lesson that I'm learning. There's a lot of, instead of doing, just be. So you don't have to produce. You have to channel and create and be. And then it's going to be authentic. That's a tough shift to make after many years in corporate. And then just the patience of knowing and trusting that what you're creating is going to resonate. I think, we see it a lot I watch a ton of TikTok. I think it's an incredible tool for creativity, and to see people taking old clips of shows that we watched, when I was in my 20s, and people will now act them out, or they'll make music that'll be like, oh, I made the perfect soundtrack for Laguna Beach. And people can find creativity even in old things and make them new again. And so that could maybe that's what Fonte will be. He might just hang out until he makes an inspiration on someone else. Let's see.
100%. I'm waiting for Fonte on Spotify.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he would love to make music. Honestly, I was preparing for this from a kind of a content standpoint, from my own perspective. And then I said, well, let me not even use ChatGPT. I used Claude AI. I said, let me actually go in as Fonte, and it knows Fonte. It helps develop his personality. And so I said, well, what if Fonte was showing up on this podcast? And my gosh, it recommended, he would wear a little bow tie, which was the first bow tie he wore on this Wall Street Stock Exchange. And so it came up with all the details for how Fonte would want to show himself in his best way on this podcast to you. So thank you for believing in him, because that really, I think that's the other thing I probably never articulated this until now or realized it, is that the acceptance of Fonte becomes an acceptance of you and your creation. I don't think that as a creative, I don't think I expected that to be so intertwined with what it is that I'm putting out there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important kind of moment to take there, because you spoke about imagination earlier, and it touches on that, because a lot of people think of imagination as this, woofy, up in the air, far away thing, and it turns into movies and whatever else. But imagination to me is reality. It's just not always the reality you see in front of you right now, but it can be the next reality. And, as you visualize, as you manifest, for example, then that's imagination becoming reality. So I know I've also struggled a long journey of kind of not always articulating my imagination to reality, because you feel like it's not necessarily accepted. But I think through stories, through characters like Fonte, you get to share that with the world, which is beautiful. And you get to feel that acceptance, like you say, So just know we love Fonte, and I can't wait to have a conversation with him sometime.
I hope so. That's probably, let's add that to the 1 year from now. Maybe yes. It could be, yeah. He actually, it's interesting. He has a podcast called the Positive Pachyderm Podcast. And this was originally, I think actually, if I may, I would be a little remiss if I didn't mention this. Ultimately, I want Fonte to be the lovable, and I can't make anybody love him, but I hope he's lovable, that we can very tactfully encourage people to think about elephant welfare. So there was a good 2 years during COVID when I was really into, in addition to Fonte and writing the stories about saving the elephants, please don't ride on their backs. And activism is I learned a lot about activism at that point. And from my standpoint, I think I'm much more comfortable with having Fonte, for example, deliver pizzas, and that's his job, his side hustle here. And originally I would have thought he would put the pizzas on his back and carry them. And then when I very early started, and this is why I'm so glad I didn't commercialize Fonte too soon, because I would have potentially put a message out there that was a bit ignorant from my own perspective, which is I might have had Fonte doing things that were seemingly innocuous but actually dangerous. And so one of the stories is that he works at the pizza parlor, and they contract with Vroom Enterprises, which is this scooter company, and Mr. Vroom is so taken with wanting to help that he creates the Pizza Pro elephant scooter for Fonte. So it's basically just a message of he knows elephants shouldn't give rides and shouldn't carry things on his back, so here's this scooter. And then what ends up happening is people make TikToks about him because they see Fonte driving on the scooter. So it shows, innovation when done for this huge elephant can be something for all animals and people, safety, disability, things like that. And then it can also spark creativity. So I'm sort of seeing also that there's a way that I can deliver a message of elephant welfare and elephant safety. And again, if you're listening, please don't ride elephants. It hurts their backs, and it's really they're in captivity when they give these rides, and they're in chains. A lot of that metaphoric kind of symbolism of breaking free and things like that, I'm realizing I can also do through storytelling. It need not be so aggressive. I very much respect the people, and we support Fonte, and I support a lot of the rehabilitation and a lot of the elephant sanctuaries. And yet we also want to say that, he is imaginary. As real as he is, this is the other thing too, is understanding real and imaginary. And with AI, we're going to be able to be more flexible about that. And so Fonte is very real in my heart. He's also imaginary in the sense that he would never be hanging on washing windows outside with a chain. So sorry, that was a bit of a long way of saying it, but I also would really love to impress upon people too that creativity and the way that we think about our own challenges, they run really deep. Who's to say in 5 years I might not myself be I need to free Fonte from even being a window washer. He should be roaming free. So there could be a lot of other things that are yet to be uncovered.
I love that. Yeah, and it's a great message. I think it's something people don't really think about when it. I know it's a great experience, but animals don't always have the voice that we have to express how they're feeling, and so you get to do that through your stories too. So thank you for doing that. And talking about kind of content creation, I wanted to just take a moment and highlight our partner for the month. We love collaborations at Friday Feels, and this month our spotlight is on our partner called Riverside FM, which is this platform we're recording on, and it really empowers us to tell stories, authentically, from idea to the last episode and how we created. And we really partnered with them because as a traveling podcast, it's not always in one place. We get to do these local recordings in great quality, and yeah, it's just amazing. Thank you so much, guys, for making this real, for bringing tech for the real moments like this and being able to give us a platform. And then I also want to give a quick shout out to what we've now doing is called our people, places and spaces around the world that we feel have got the feels. And so one of the places that I came across, and it's not really a place, and this is why I love it, it's a space. It's called Faire, and it means to make, and the marketplace is really online. And I think a lot of us kind of always gravitate to the Amazons of the world, and nothing against you guys, love you guys too. But Faire is very much about empowering local community and very authentic crafting, which I think is beautiful. So go check them out. Just wanted to say love your feels, guys, and thank you for what you creating space for in the world for creators. Between the online Riversides and the local community crafting, there's so much beautiful creation and creativity out there, and now we have you with your storytelling, and it's just really beautiful to share that. So I want to take a quick moment to also have us share our gems, something we do every week. I think it's a really nice time also between Christmas and New Year to do that. And I'll start just so you kind of get the idea. But a gem for me this week was really, it's something that you have gratitude for, that you've learned. And I've really had a beautiful privilege of being with wonderful friends, being alone in Paris, but having people that are very authentic in their being around me, giving me the space to be my authentic self. And so I think sometimes we are so used to having kind of the surface level, small talk conversations out there, but it's really become quite important to me to form these deep connections and have those conversations that kind of take you to a place where you can share things about yourself and uncover things about yourself with somebody else in a very unconditionally accepting way. So I just want to say thank you for the people who have been with me in this period of Christmas, that I can experience that, and very, very, very grateful. And you, Rachana, how was your Christmas time, and kind of what was your dream for the last week?
I wasn't expecting this. I should have expected it, but I love that it's so specific. And so I'm going to go with it's music, and probably very specifically it's, I mentioned earlier, I watch a lot of TikTok, and it just happens to be where I discover a lot of music. And so, you'll be swiping and you'll see lots of really cool things, crafts, interesting things, perspectives, and there will always be a DJ playing. And so you can just drop in on their live, and they're full playing music. And you see people commenting, you're all over the world. People are wishing each other Merry Christmas, or just what they're doing from, if it's a snow day where they are. And it's so brief. I mean, it's like 3 people maybe in a room of 200 people that are even commenting. But you see this DJ, and he or she is just putting all of their vibes and energy in, and you can't help but just be like, okay, this is my opportunity to take the next 5 minutes while I like this song and just dance and just have it. So I know you're a musician, and I just cannot stress enough how much music has, it's such a foundation of a lot of Fonte as well. He's in a cover band and all these things, but being able to access music from around the world where it's just delivered. I just want us to marvel at social media. I know that there's a lot, it's complicated our lives in a lot of ways. It's also, I think we should marvel at it, because how it's been able to invite people's creativity into my world has definitely fueled Fonte. Maybe we will be able to have the same, we will be able to marvel at AI the same way, but that's my gem, it's music.
I love it, and for some people who have listened to this podcast for a season before, will know dancing's my therapy too. So I just resonate so much with what you're saying. It's so great to kind of let loose and just go and, kudos to those DJs who are doing what they love out in this time, and that people can appreciate it. So thank you for sharing that, Jem. That's really, really, really awesome. And I do have one more question for you before we wrap up. We started this new thing called the Stack. It's really our reading room, our reading list, and it's really any kind of words or, maybe there's a book that you read this year or this last while or that you'd like to read, that you'd like to recommend. So I want to ask you, what is in your stack?
Oh my God. Okay. So, many, many, many things. I'm going to say that probably the two books that I'll mention, one is, it's about Jim Henson, and it's called Make Art, Make Money. And it's the irony of doing what you love and getting commercial success. But the whole book really is about his creative journey and how he just made art. And I love that the money part and the commercialization of this is part of it, but it's really about a lot of what we talked about. So Make Art, Make Money. And then the other one I'll mention is The Magic of Thinking Big. This is like an old school book. It's from like maybe the 30s or the 1930s, 1940s. We're almost coming up on 100 years now. The 1930s, 1940s. And it's one of those typical how to win friends and influence people type of things. A lot of the stories that the author uses, David Schwartz, a lot of the stories he uses are about like traveling salespeople and things like that. So stuff that's like really dated, but it is all about optimism. It's all about these same principles. And I think that seeing that in like I've read this book for years, and it's actually kind of integral also in the Fonte story, but I've just picked it up again specifically for the sense of kind of what we're talking about with respect to putting your ideas out in the world in a big way as kind of a new person. And so that's a classic that I would recommend.
I love it. I'm definitely going to be reading both of them, because a lot of what I've been working on is this idea of the entrepreneur. How are you an artist and entrepreneur all at the same time? I think it's so intertwined. I think people have separated it in so many ways. But anyway, it's a topic.
I've never heard that word, entrepreneur.
Entrepreneur, yeah. And I'm starting to kind of call myself that, because I really would like to understand, how do you make money as an artist? It's really difficult. And I think we have this old school way of thinking that artists are always suffering. We are inside always suffering. That's what makes the art. But
yes.
We don't have to suffer financially.
Yes. I love that. No, and money, I mean, that's probably, I don't know to what extent that's future topics, but money is a really, really interesting thing. And I think that being a creator, and maybe it's through reading that book or just in general, money takes on a different meaning too. It becomes a real blessing of energy, and you receive it in a very different way, I think, as a creative. So that resonates a lot with me, and hopefully we can chat about that too at some point.
Absolutely. I would so love to have more conversations, and I feel like there's so much more to unpack here. But thank you so much for sharing today. Thank you for giving your heart on here, and sharing Fonte, and I almost feel like I want to give him a big hug, and in spirit I am.
Oh, received. It's received. Thank you, really. And thank you for believing in him. I did not mean to make Fonte the focus of this conversation. There's so much more. But as a creative, it's kind of all you can think about when you're creating something. So thank you for indulging that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that so much, and I know everyone else out there, listening is also kind of mulling over probably where's their imagination going. What does their character look like? And I invite people who are listening, as we wrap up this theme of reinventing your conditioning, what do you feel that how you've been conditioned in your life, and what kind of pivots have you taken to change your life and go in different directions, and to ultimately live a pivotal life, which is this existence that you were yearning for, that you born to be. And so thank you so much for giving us some of that of where you are now, as you said, it's the now, it's maybe not the forever, and we're excited to see what comes for you going forward and to watch this journey. And, as we kind of go into the new year, for everyone, I just want to wish everyone amazing celebrations. Whatever you get up to, I hope you're dancing, I hope you're safe, and I hope you enter the new year with optimism and just a wonderful sense of stillness within yourself, knowing that 2025 will be an epic year. I have a very good feeling for all of us about it. So just before we go, where can everyone find you and how can people connect with you? I think people would love to reach out, I'm sure.
Oh, thank you so much. I echo all the beautiful sentiments that you sent out to your listeners and audience. On LinkedIn is the best way. So Fonty and I, we have a newsletter called The Elephant in the Window, and we write about AI, music, workplace psychology, all the practical things about managing change and pivoting. All of that's in there. Just click in one article and you might find, you'll be able to kind of see what our vibe is. So we would love to have you click in LinkedIn. And then his archived stories, not even archived, they're living on Instagram. So Fonty Tales, The Positive Pachyderm, he's around. And I would love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn as well. If you're into change or corporate psychology or leadership, these are all topics that we talk about. And if you're kind of willing to talk about them through me and an elephant, or just me, but it benefits you to do it with the elephant too, because you get a very, very different perspective and you get all my experience plus this creative way of existing with AI. We would love to connect with everyone. That's a very, very genuine request. I really, really would love to connect with people if they're interested in what we're up to.
Oh, amazing. Oh, no, well, thank you so much. I will put all of that stuff in the social, so check it out. And just wishing you a wonderful almost said Christmas celebration.
Well, it still kind of is, yeah.
I hope that you're finding more DJs and dancing, and please do share some of the vibes this way. And just sending you big hugs and love from Paris, and thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, right back at you, Nicole. Very, very happy New Year and much love.
If you haven't just yet, follow Friday Feels on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn. You can share with us all your feels this week by tagging us at fridayfeels.co. And you can also find the website at that handle. And now, as you ease into this weekend, take a moment. Celebrate who you've become, what you've overcome, and what is yet to come as you do the crazy and cool things that you do as the authentic you. The truth about life and work is that it's hard, but the beauty is this global working experience that you're in, well, we earn it together. So keep connecting, empowering, and inspiring this week. And of course, keep it raw and real. Until next time.